Okie doke. It looks like we are now live. The Training Cafe is open for business. It's Sunday, March 16th, 2025. This is the first time I've done a Training Cafe on a Sunday, so I don't know what to expect here. Typically, I do these at noon on Monday. People might be at work or at school and have a time to take a break and join in on the video. Sundays, people go out and climb and train and do other things. And so maybe this isn't the best time, but I'm hoping to go climbing tomorrow. And today's kind of a showery day where I'm at. And so it made more sense to make today a work day and do a training cafe and talk to you about training for climbing and climbing performance and what things might be holding you back from taking your climbing to the next grade. Those are all things we're going to get to here in the next 30 to 40 minutes in the Training Cafe. Let's let people trickle in here for another 30 seconds or a minute, and we'll get the show started here. We are streaming live, hopefully, on the Training for Climbing YouTube channel, the Training for Climbing Facebook page, and hopefully the Training for Climbing Instagram. And so if you're in one of those three locations, welcome. And hopefully, since it's the Training Cafe, like me, you have some coffee or another beverage to sip here during the show. And in a little bit, we'll get to your questions. If you have a Training for Climbing question, type it into the comments box. Now, the one thing that's a little tricky here is I may only see comments typed into the YouTube feed and the Facebook feed. So if you're joining me on Instagram, I may not see any comments that you type in. But in any case, if you have a question you want me to answer later on in this episode on any performance-related topic, climbing-related topic, you can type it into the comments box, and I'll get to that in just a bit. As always, at the Training Cafe, I start off with a bit of a lecture. Today's topic is 5 things that might be holding you back, 5 reasons why perhaps you have plateaued or not improved much recently. And so I'll run you through that list. Hopefully it'll open your eyes to some things to work on and hopefully help you break that plateau and open up the next grade of bouldering or rock climbing, whatever your passion is. Now, since this is the Training Cafe, every episode we start off with a simultaneous sip where climbers unite, climbers around the world. Let's sip our coffee together. Because what is better than talking climbing and drinking coffee? Not many things are better than that. And so the old coach looks forward to these opportunities, whether I run into you at a climbing gym or at a crag somewhere or here during this live stream. It's great to kind of connect with you one way or another. And if our paths ever cross in person, don't hesitate to say hi. I'd love to shake your hand and talk climbing or training, whatever. So let's get on with the main topic today, the 5 reasons why many climbers at some point reach a plateau, stop getting better. I'm one of them, and I'm going to get to, why I've had a tough time in recent years breaking into the next grade. But for every climber, it's quite different. And, of course, climbing is a sport that's grown a lot in recent years. There's a lot of people in our sport that have only been a climber for a year or 2 or 3 or 4. I'm the anomaly. Someone who's been climbing almost 50 years is the anomaly. There's not too many of us still around and still fighting the good fight, and out there on the rocks trying to climb hard and do things. And so depending where you're at in that arc of the climbing career, different things can crop up and hold you back and be the reason that you haven't improved much lately. And so let me get to number 1 of 5 reasons I'm going to cover here that perhaps you've reached a bit of a plateau. And the first reason is that you're simply not climbing enough. I'm very fond of pointing out that climbing is a skill sport first and foremost. Yes, it's very physical. Yes, there are very critical mental aspects that need to be refined. But First and foremost, when you step onto the climbing wall at a gym or outdoors, a boulder or a crag, it is a skill sport that involves kind of an infinite playing field. It's a lot to learn. If you play an instrument or have studied any complex topic, you don't learn it overnight. You don't learn it in a semester at school. It's an extended course of study. And in the case of climbing, this very complex sport that has so many different types, subtypes and subdisciplines, there's so much to learn. And so if you're only, 1 to 5 years into the sport, you've learned about this much. You might feel like you've learned a lot and you've perhaps improved a lot, but there's so much more to learn. I am still learning things about climbing, novel movements or distinctions that are teeny tiny but important, after decades in the sport. And so my advice to you, if you are only climbing, say, 1 day a week or a couple of days a month, the first thing you need to do is to find a way to climb more often, because it's hard to improve at anything if you're only doing it once a week or twice a month. You're not going to get much better at guitar if you only pick up the guitar back there once or twice a month. And the same thing with climbing. It's a sport that you really need to do a few days a week. I coach people to strive to climb 2 to 4 days per week. Now, that could be a mix of indoor climbing, climbing on a home wall, or going outdoors onto the boulders and crags that are nearby. And, that's what makes it tough for some people. Depending where you live, you may not have easy access to outdoor rock climbing. Where I live in Pennsylvania, world-class climbing is a 6 or 8 hour drive away. And there's some backwater crags that are decent in Pennsylvania that when I was a younger person, I climbed on and bolted routes, but there's not much there for me anymore. I've kind of done it all. And so when I'm at home, I'm training either on my home wall or at a climbing gym, say in Philadelphia, or I'm traveling somewhere, trying to climb outdoors a few days per week. So with your situation, you need to try to, with your schedule, and life is complex with, jobs and school and family and other obligations. But if climbing is important, you need to, create time in each week to climb at least twice a week. Getting to a climbing gym, if possible, is a great thing. If you have one within 30-minute drive of your home or work, that you can get there a couple of days a week, or even 3 or 4 days a week if you're not climbing outdoors, say on the weekends. If you don't have a climbing gym nearby, then it's really important, if possible, to build some type of a home woodie, a small home wall that you can boulder on or do circuit laps on. And again, it's, a pretty small playing field, but it's better than nothing. It gives you some movement training and obviously some climbing specific strength training. But, climbing is a movement sport, and, the younger you are as a climber or in your career, the newer you are at climbing, the more coarse your movement and the more inefficient your movement is. And even for advanced climbers, every year they're trying to refine movement a little bit to get a few percent more efficient. And that can oftentimes help open up a grade. So build a home wall, get to a climbing gym or get a climbing gym membership. And I'll tell you, long term, if you're a young person watching this, over the course of the coming years, is there a way you can move closer to climbing, both outdoor climbing and closer, to a town that has a really high quality climbing gym to train at, bouldering and rock climbing. I've run into many climbers who discover climbing. Maybe they live in a place like Miami or Dallas, where there's no outdoor climbing nearby, but there's a pretty good gym. And so they get hooked and they train and climb at the gym. And, the outdoor climbing trips are few and far between, but they discover they're so in love with climbing that it doesn't make sense to live in Miami or Dallas long term. And so you then look about how you can shape your life and build the life that you really dream of, where you can be closer to the thing that you love so much, which is probably climbing if you're watching this video. So, depending where you live in the world, that can be easier said than done. If you live in the Western United States, there's a lot of places you could move and hopefully find a job and, kind of plant some roots and be very near to a good climbing gym and some good outdoor climbing. But if you live in the Midwestern United States or the Southeastern United States, or somewhere in Europe that's very distant from climbing, or a big city with a climbing gym, then it can be more challenging. But long term, think about how you can get your body closer to where the thing you love is. Okay, so let's move on to the second thing that is holding many climbers back and is a reason that you might have plateaued. And I can explain this number two reason with a single word: fear. Now, there are many different types of fear that can affect your climbing. The big one is fear of falling, fear of getting hurt. You get up on a boulder and in a weird position, or a high ball boulder, not in a weird position, you can be concerned about a fall that could twist an ankle, or you could land on your back or break your neck, if there's not a good, crash pad or spotter or whatnot available. And certainly when you do rock climbing, which is what I spend most of my time doing, there can be very fearful situations when you're on the sharp end and trying to push yourself on lead, but with a fearful mind, it's hard to break new barriers. And then there's the fear of failure. Going up on a route and not being fear of falling, but fearful of another failed day on the project or on the boulder, and that can weigh heavy on your mind and hold you back. Perhaps you climb more apprehensive and cautiously than you need to, where sometimes you just need to, cut loose and step on the gas and go, 110% at a boulder or route. And if you're fearing failure, it's hard to do that. It's hard to let loose because you're trying to remain in control. Fear of embarrassment, whether you're in a gym or in a crag environment where there's other people around, some people don't want to look bad and have people see them struggle or fall or fail on a route. And so fear of embarrassment can be a factor, but I try to encourage people I work with, long term, we need to let go of all of these fears, these kind of unreasonable fears. And to me, fear of embarrassment is kind of unreasonable because we climb for our own fun and not for other people's pleasure. And so who cares what other people think? That took me many years to kind of get to that point, but ultimately that's where you want to end up at, is not really being too concerned about what other people think of your performance on any given day. They know who you are and what you're capable of if they're a friend of yours, and everybody else doesn't really matter. And same thing with kind of the fear of failure. If you're a climber, failure is just part of the game. Unless you're climbing well below your limit where you always succeed first try, except for those situations, if you're pushing yourself, you're failing sometimes. And so you have to kind of embrace failure, because failure is the process by which we learn, hopefully, to become a better climber and take our climbing to the next level. And one more failure, or one more fear, I should say, that many people don't think about, but it's a very real one in climbing, is fear of discomfort. Climbing can be painful. I'm not just talking about like a painful handhold or painful hand jams, but the discomfort of pushing yourself physically, like a steep sport route, your forearms are exploding. In certain climbing situations, just the extraordinary fatigue can make you want to quit, make you want to take onto the rope. Certainly when you're on a project that's at your limit, you watch a video of a pro climber climbing a project at their limit. They might look calm and collect on the outside. They might, be climbing super efficiently because they've rehearsed the project many times. But I guarantee you, if they're climbing at their limit, inside they are feeling great discomfort, the same discomfort you and I feel when we're climbing at our limit, regardless of what the grade is. If you're at your limit, pushing your physical and mental constraints, there is discomfort that comes with that. If you've ever gone out and run a race, where you're running as hard as you can. It is a painful process, and the best runners learn to deal with that discomfort rather than fear the discomfort. And that's something that gradually happens over time. So that kind of does it with the second reason that you might be plateaued, the second reason being fear. Let's move on to the third reason that holds many climbers back, and that is chronic injury. It's a fact. If you're injured, you're not going to get better at this sport because you just can't try your hardest. You certainly can't train, in a very limit way if you're nursing a finger, elbow, shoulder injury, or some other injury. And so learning to kind of get out of this cycle of chronic injury. Now, there are some genetic factors, or maybe you come into climbing with injuries from other sports that get revisited because of your climbing. Everybody's a little different here, but some people are more genetically prone to getting these, joint or connective tissue injuries. And if that's you, you need to be self-aware of the situations that put you at risk of those injuries, and you really need to be cautious to avoid those. Other people might be more bulletproof, but still, even the more bulletproof individual with, let's say, good genetics in terms of being resilient, there are holds or situations where you can get a tweak in your finger or elbow or shoulder. And if it's a very minor tweak, it might be something that just takes a few days to rest and work through. Perhaps it's something a little more significant where you should see a PT or a doctor to get an accurate diagnosis and an exercise prescription for rehab. I'm really a proponent of going to that expert sooner rather than later. Many climbers wait till they're in this chronic injury, let's say an elbow, tendinosis that has developed over many months. And it really is not tendinitis, but tendinosis, failed healing, because there's been such a long period of inflamed tissue that your body's been unable to heal because it hasn't been rehabbed properly, or you haven't laid off from the aggravating exercises or the hard climbing that is, initially provoked the injury. And if you're out of climbing because of an injury of some kind, you can't get better. You can only go backwards or stay the same, maybe, if you're a very experienced climber, but you're not progressing if you're injured. And so dealing with the injuries, nipping them in the bud, obviously, climbers are enthusiastic people. We love climbing. You might be tempted to climb 7 days a week or train your fingers 7 days a week, but, climbing near your limit, high intensity climbing is really something you should only do 2 or 3 days a week. And there can be a few days of low load training or sub-maximal climbing that is more aerobic oriented, what I call zone 2 climbing. It's more about conditioning rather than stretching your boundaries and getting pumped or really worked. So you could, do a few hard days a week and a couple of easy days a week, and over the long term, see progress. But people that do too much too soon, have too little rest, and of course have too little protein and don't eat well, that is kind of the perfect storm for injury. And so I hope you can avoid that. All of these things, by the way, are things that I talk about frequently. I've written about in my books, like Training for Climbing, or on the last item, which was fear. I wrote a whole book on the mental aspects of climbing. It's called Maximum Climbing. So check that out if you haven't already. I think it's, a golden book for any serious climber to read and really challenge yourself on the mental side of things when it comes to climbing. But when it comes to chronic injury, although I've written a lot about that, I'm not a medical doctor, and I always encourage people to seek out a qualified person, a PT or a medical doctor, to do your diagnosis, and not a coach or a climber at the gym. They could be right, they could be wrong in terms of what their diagnosis and exercise prescription is. Okay, on to the fourth reason that you might be in a plateau or that your climbing hasn't improved, and that is a lack of commitment. So maybe you have the gym and the rock nearby. Maybe you have the home wall or the training tools. Maybe you have a high level of skill. You've been climbing for 5 or 10 or 15 years, But despite all those things, you're not improving. Well, it could be your commitment, that you're not, willing to go all in to the extent that it will take to go to the next level. If you're already climbing at a high level, 512 or 513 or bouldering V9 or V10, getting that next grade is hard to do. It's, you kind of, with your skill and strength and even your mental skills, you learn, there's a steep learning curve the first few years, and then it becomes more of an, asymptote over time, over years and decades. And so, continuing to take steps up becomes harder and harder as you advance up the learning curve. And so a higher level of commitment in terms of following through with your training program. If you're someone who gets, for a month, gets to the gym regularly and follows through with an intelligently designed training program, but then for some reason take a few weeks off, well, you're going to backtrack naturally. Now, a deload week every now and then is fine and actually a good thing if you're training hard. But if you're taking multiple weeks off, or just dropping out of climbing for a month or two at a time, or maybe you take the whole winter off and you don't touch the rock, or don't go to a climbing gym, or don't do a climbing specific workout for 3 months during the winter, and you're like, I'll catch back up in the spring. Well, you're backtracking in terms of your conditioning, maybe not so much your skills if you're a veteran climber, but you are losing fitness, obviously, that will need to be regained. And so, that year-round commitment to climbing, to staying in shape, to hopefully leading and eating, a clean, healthy lifestyle, all those things kind of piece together. And I'll tell you, I have been lucky to be around, quite a few of the world's top climbers, people that climb 515 plus, crazy hard grades. I have a couple of sons who have become really high-end climbers, and I've been able to coach and in recent years more observe what they do as they're off on their own as young adults now. And to really perform at a high level does take discipline and commitment. And that means, they are, as young climbers or those pros, aren't behaving like ordinary people their age. They're not out, drinking 3 nights a week at a bar, and they're not eating fast food. Some of these pros that I'm around, it's kind of like 24/7. Everything they do is with intention of not hurting their climbing performance, and it's with intention to help them recover faster, get prepared, and physically and mentally ready for their next day on the rocks or their next workout at the gym. And they've got all their bases covered, the flexibility training, the recovery activities, the nutrition plan, getting the macros just right for what they're seeking to do with their diet. And then, of course, what they do in the gym or at the crag is highly personalized. They're not copying off of another pro climber. They are doing what is going to meet their needs and address their limited constraint, or be appropriately targeted on whatever their project climb is. And so commitment is critical for taking your game to the high level year over year. Okay, and let's move on to the fifth and kind of final thing, although there's many reasons that people hit plateaus or they don't improve, but these are kind of the 5 big ones. And this last one relates to training. I haven't really talked specifically about training for climbing in these first 4 steps. They were other things. And that speaks to how, diverse the influences are on our climbing performance, that I went through 4 items that really didn't have to do with training specifically. And they are very important, or potentially limiting in your climbing ability, my climbing ability. And here, the 5th item I'm going to get to, obviously, is that, to continue to improve in climbing means you need to improve physically in terms of strength, power, endurance, stamina, recovery ability, perhaps flexibility, definitely resilience, building a stronger body that is going to be able to hold up to the rigors of climbing, and so that you don't frequently get laid up and set back by a climbing injury of some type. And so I don't want to go down the rabbit hole here on any specifics, but obviously climbing is a strength to weight ratio sport. So, you're climbing specific strength parameters like finger strength, pulling strength, core strength. Hopefully you're able to train in a way that you can level them up a little bit each season. And again, the more years you're at, the harder it is to eke out that next advance. And for someone like me, basically 5 decades into the sport, and I'm an old guy, I'm still climbing pretty hard, hopefully this season. But my strength, it's almost impossible to break any new ground. At this point, it's about preventing losses. But if you're a 20-something, 30-something, 40-something, or a newer climber of only a few years that is in their 50s, you can definitely continue to improve physically. And so you need to be thinking about strength and power and climbing specific endurance, but also the other side of the equation, strength to weight ratio. This is a strength to weight ratio sport, is your body weight. And so, of course, I'm not an advocate of losing weight at all costs. Certainly starving yourself is not a sustainable thing. While athletes, including climbers, can tune their diet in season to drop a few pounds, they're not year-round trying to do that. They might gain some weight during the off-season training and then fine-tune their diet and training to drop a few pounds in performance season. Most pro climbers that I've worked with or that I know do that type of thing, but they're not starving themselves. They're not eating this scant diet of calories and low protein, that if you did, you would lose muscle mass. So your weight would go down on the scales, but so would your strength. And of course, your injury risk and incidence would go up with that type of thing. And so, there is such a thing as not eating enough. And that is a problem in strength to weight ratio sports. So I'm definitely not advocating anything like that. I'm advocating a healthful diet. Potentially, if you're a professional athlete or someone who is serious about climbing, you have a climbing coach, but also perhaps a nutritionist, or better yet, a registered dietitian, because that's kind of the gold standard for nutritional advice, is a registered dietitian, working with one that understands the needs of a climber. If you work with a registered dietitian who's used to working with bodybuilders, they could put you kind of on the wrong diet plan. Your climbers aren't bodybuilders. And so, a climbing diet is a bit different in terms of the calories that are needed and the amount of protein. We want to, of course, maintain our strength and power at all costs, but not pack on excessive body weight that's going to weigh us down. Because if you climb overhanging rock, weight is a massive factor. If you climb slabs, then less so. But if you climb overhanging rock, especially long boulders or routes, weight, 5 or 10 pounds is massive difference, just massive difference. And so if you're carrying a bit of a spare tire around your waist, 5 or 10 pounds of adipose tissue, you would be a better climber without that, no doubt. If you have big hulking leg muscles because you do squats and bodybuilding workouts, that is likely counterproductive as well if you're climbing steep boulders or routes. And so all of these things need to be nuanced more and more every year, as should be your training program. And as I mentioned previously, your commitment and the things you're willing to sacrifice to advance as a climber. Those are all pieces of the puzzle that as you become more of an advanced climber, a veteran climber, you need to get more of those things dialed in to eke out the next grade. So there are 5 reasons why perhaps you haven't improved much recently. Maybe one of them hits home and it will give you some clues or things to think about and work on this season and beyond. And I guess I do need to mention one more thing, because it kind of relates to the position I'm in as a 60-year-old climber, of almost 50 years. And that is another reason in the very long term, like that arc of your climbing career, like decades down that arc, as I am, and climbers of my generation are, if they're even still at the sport, you know, there is such a thing as aging out in a sport where you just can't get better in terms of your strength and power. Certainly, my power is not where it was 20 years ago, though my strength is, my power is not. And so I don't boulder as hard. I have a tougher time on hard crux moves. I'm a great endurance climber, but I'm lacking in the power. And so with advancing age, you are naturally going to lose some things. Hopefully you can compensate. Climbing is a beautiful sport because what I lose in power, I can compensate for in mastery, movement efficiency, wisdom of how to project a route, and be able to kind of outsmart a route sometimes, rather than a younger climber who can just power through the route. And so that's a beautiful thing about climbing, is even older guys can climb at a high level because there are ways to make up for what you lose physically. But there is such a thing as kind of aging out in a sport, and reaching even genetic potential. If you are a 20 or 30 something that trains very hard year over year for a few decades, by age 40, 45, 50, you may not be able to get the next level of finger strength anymore. But again, when that progress ceases, there may still be some other things to work on. There likely are, mentally and technically, that can continue your progress into the middle ages, your middle age years, and beyond. And, none of these things are unique to climbing. I mean, if you're, there's a reason there's only a few people in the NFL in their 40s. There's a reason, that a skill sport like golf, people will peak generally in their 30s, after they've played for 20 years. They've got their 10 or 20,000 hours of golf practice in, and they kind of have that perfect combination of things in their life coming together to play their best golf in their 30s. But in most sports, the fact is you reach 40 or 50 and it's a downhill slide in ability. And climbing, again, is unique. I'm 60, and in the past couple of years, I've climbed some of my hardest routes, 513C kind of routes. And that's a really hard route for me. I have to work on it. But I think that should be encouraging to everybody listening, regardless of your age. That is, if this old guy can still be kind of trying to reach another grade, or at least maintain a high grade into my 60s, that's an encouraging sign that you likely have many more years to get better at climbing as well. Okay, so I've talked here, about a half an hour already. So let's get to a few questions. I see some comments typed in here in the form of questions. I also understand it's Sunday and a lot of people are out at the climbing gym or at the crags or boulders. And you'll be watching this later on, in which case I won't be able to answer your question, but you join me for the live stream, and that is kind of a perk that you get. So let's take a look here at just a couple of questions, and then we'll wrap this up in maybe 10 or 15 minutes. Okay. First question from JR says he does a lot of grainy slab climbing in, I assume that's Oklahoma. So maybe some granite climbing there, I believe. How do you toughen up and callus the fingers for slabs when you can't be on a slab often enough by way of outdoor climbing? Yeah, that's a really good question. And there is something to be said for if you're regularly climbing on real rock a couple of days a week, that you do kind of develop thicker skin that persists week over week as long as you're climbing on real rock. But if you're climbing on a woody, let's say at home, or training on a beast maker, you're not getting, the same wear and tear and shearing and the things that kind of provide a stimulus for, the skin to grow and thicken up. And so that's a tough one. There are a few companies out there that make indoor climbing holds. They might be wood on the base, but have a rock veneer on top. I can't think of any company names off the top of my head, but I've seen some of those holds. I've had some of them sent to me in recent years, so I know there are products out there. If you could even just get a few of those that you add, bolt onto your door jamb, above your doorway in your house, that you could do some hangs or some pull-ups on, that would be something. I don't know that, I guess if you're in the climbing gym and there's some brand new holds that haven't been broken in and polished yet, perhaps they would be coarse enough to provide some wear and tear. But that's a challenging thing. That situation is if you're only getting out to that grainy, slabby rock once or twice a month, it's just not enough to develop that. So I don't have any great secrets other than to maybe try to seek out a few of those holds. Or maybe you could even, take some sandpaper and, add it on to some wood climbing holds, a few bigger grips or something. I don't know. I'm just thinking out of the box. Maybe somebody else, a viewer here, has some ideas that they can share. Next question from Nat is, hear a lot about the importance it is to hangboard at least once a week. Do you agree with this even during mesocycles that aren't focused on strength? Yes, ultimately, the finger, the connective tissues of the fingers are uniquely stressed by climbing, and over the long term, the tendons and pulleys do thicken, hypertrophy slightly. There's been some research done. I've talked to the climbing surgeons who repair these pulley injuries. They look at the fingers of a veteran climber compared to a non-veteran climber, and the flexor tendons and pulleys are thicker. They do, increase collagen content and hypertrophy over years, not over days, weeks, or even months. It's a very long-term commitment. So exposing those fingers to some loading at a very frequent and consistent rate is important to, provide that stimulus to, lay down these microscopic bits of collagen that accumulate over many years. And so while I do not advocate intensive hangboard training or intensive finger training 4, 5, 6, 7 days a week, some enthusiastic climbers do that because they just want to get stronger, and they all end up injured, or most of them end up injured pretty quickly. You just can't do that type of high load or high intensity finger training or climbing that frequently. And in terms of fingerboard training, if you have a fingerboard at home, I think twice a week, if you're doing kind of a strength training protocol, twice a week is adequate. There's also, some coaches out there, and I've talked about this over the last, 6, 7 years, the idea of doing low load hangboard training, where perhaps your toes are on the ground and you're just hanging with a portion of your body weight, or you set up a counterweight system where you can have 50 pounds in a counterweight and hang at your body weight minus 50 pounds. And that type of low load training provides a stimulus for strengthening the connective tissues, but is not so excessive that it's going to promote or risk injury, let's say. And so all of this needs to be kind of intelligently designed. But to get back to kind of your basic question is, yes, I think, even if it's your off season from climbing, you probably want to do a couple of hangboard workouts a week. Maybe only one is a strength oriented protocol, and maybe one is an endurance protocol where you're doing repeaters on a comfortable hold at body weight or even less than body weight. And again, you could do that type of thing, the low load, less than body weight, or what some people call no hang training, that is quite mild in intensity. You could do that type of thing almost daily. It's kind of like, you're not going to hurt your knees and ankles if you go for a walk every day. But if you do plyo box jumps every day, you would probably get injured. And so it all comes down to the intensity of the particular exercise. And so if it's a low enough intensity, you can expose your fingers to a bit of loading that could be beneficial on almost a daily basis. So hopefully that makes sense. And I appreciate the question. Okay, let's see if there's one or two more here. I appreciate just a few people say hi, coach, and such. Let's just see what we got here from John. If you start climbing at 37 or 38, how many years of power and strength gains do you think I have ahead of me? Seriously, at least 20. I'm dead serious. At least 20. At least, to age 57 or 58, and perhaps into your 60s. Now, again, we're all a little different genetically. What is your past sports history? Do you have, bad shoulders from playing football as a younger person? If you have done work with your hands, people that do laborious jobs, their hands, although it's not climbing specific work, their connective tissues have adapted from years of that, fingery work in a way that actually helps them be more resilient as they get into climbing as a middle-aged climber. So there's a lot of variables there, but just as a rough answer, you get on an intelligent and very gradually progressive program, you can improve, maybe not every single year, but you will eke out some gains one way or another, well into your 50s and perhaps even into your 60s. Nutrition becomes really important, or more, it's important for everybody, but 40s, 50s, the nutrition, getting it dialed in, is, more and more important. Of course, as you get older, our hormone profiles change in a bad way. And so I've really, over the last decade, gotten on top of my supplement game, doing things that, there are certain supplements and micronutrients that many people are deficient on: vitamin D, zinc, magnesium, selenium, boron, that if you're deficient in those, you are adversely, your hormones are going the wrong direction to support training gains and strength gains. Protein, getting at minimum 1 gram per half pound of body weight. And that's the bare minimum. Really, you should be shooting for 3/4 of a gram to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. And that, as an older climber, is very important to kind of fight off that sarcopenia, the age-related muscle loss that corresponds to the loss of strength and power. So you need to be doing the training that is appropriate to kind of provide the stimulus for strength gains, but also provide your body with the building blocks necessary to continue to build. And I'll take this opportunity to shamelessly plug my nutrition company, PhysiVantage Nutrition, because we provide the tools. They're designed specifically by me with some food scientists to make the cleanest, highest quality nutrition available for doing all the things I just mentioned in terms of providing you with the protein for muscle recovery and connective tissue recovery. We have a product called Vitalium, which is a daily supplement, which has all of those micronutrients that I mentioned a few minutes ago that are missing or commonly deficient in Western diets, that even for younger people, but especially for older people, will adversely affect your testosterone levels, your hormone levels, and your ability to recover from exercise and gain strength. And a simple daily supplement that provides you with those micronutrients that are commonly deficient in our diets. Over the long term, you take it daily so that you can kind of build up what you need in your body. Can be a real game changer. So check out the Vitalium daily supplement that we have at physivantage.com. Okay, a few more questions here. Bird Friend, is a tread wall useful for someone who started bouldering a few months ago and can do V3 or V4? A gym is far away, so I can only get there 2 or 3 days a week. I think of a tread wall, and I am an owner of a tread wall. I think of it as more of a tool for route climbers, because you can train volume and do different interval training protocols on a tread wall that are very effective at building climbing specific endurance needed for routes, that kind of aerobic endurance. If you're a boulder specialist, the aerobic endurance isn't so important because bouldering, typical bouldering routes that last less than 30 seconds, like on a kilter board or bouldering outdoors, 30-second efforts are largely anaerobic with a small aerobic contribution, and the recovery between the boulders is aerobic. But the tread wall isn't, the ideal training tool, let's say. If you're getting to the gym twice a week and you dedicate those 2 sessions to, focused bouldering, that's pretty good. And maybe at home you get a Beastmaker or some other hangboard to do 1 supplemental hangboard session a week at home. And then if you had a tread wall, then I would add in a 4th session a week that is aerobic conditioning. And you could do, there's interval protocols, like where you climb 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, and you do that 6 times in a row, 30 on, 30 off, 30 on, 30 off, on a tread wall. And that provides a very interesting and I think beneficial blend of anaerobic training and aerobic training, because the 30 seconds on are kind of an all-out thing. You're climbing as hard as you can, grabbing small holds and not doing anything overly technical, but just trying to move quickly and powerfully for 30 seconds, which is very anaerobic. And then you step off for 30 seconds and your heart rate is elevated and your blood is circulating. And it's all about your body's trying to recover as fast as it can after that 30-second burn. And so that is, in a way, exercising the aerobic energy system. The heart and the mitochondria function and the circulatory system are all getting a stimulus for improvement. And then you're back on for your next 30-second interval. And so that's one of my favorite protocols, in that it trains both the anaerobic and aerobic energy systems, but in a kind of a targeted way, a novel way that could help you out as a boulder over the long term, and definitely helps me out as a route climber. Now, there's many other protocols that you can do on a tread wall that I won't get into here, but that's one you might try if you have access to a tread wall. Okay, Van Dang. As a dad to a newborn, I have maybe 1 to 2 hours per week to climb at the gym. What should I focus on at home versus at the gym? I'm a mid-12 sport climber at the New River Gorge. Hey, that's my former home area that I love so much. And it is a very bouldery climbing area, as you know. Even the routes are bouldery, as a rule of thumb. And I can relate to your situation, because I once had 2 newborns that I had to kind of work around, and that really limited climbing. And, for me, having home training tools was the answer, and a godsend. At that point, when we had our kids over 20 years ago, I just had a small woody, like a 45-degree woody, that I could boulder on and do some very boring circuits on. I had a couple of hangboards and some other tools, a TRX trainer. Obviously, you can do some core exercises. I had a set of rings that I did dips on, and front levers and things like that. So I would say, if you can cobble together some home training tools, that you can do a couple of workouts at home, and then when you go to the gym, you want to focus on climbing. You don't want to go to the gym and hangboard train. You want to go to the gym and do things you can't do at home. So yes, you could definitely, if you're into bouldering or limit sport climbing, then a session on the kilter board each week would be a really beneficial thing to really work limit movements and hard, powerful problems to kind of stretch your abilities. But also, if you're a route climber at the New River Gorge, you do need to be building endurance. And so I would, if you're getting to the gym twice a week, maybe one session is about the kilter board and the other session is about getting on some routes. Whether you're doing laps on a auto belay, though they might not be so hard, but also getting on some steeper routes that kind of give you that, train that ability to climb through a pump, which is very important when outdoor sport climbing. And then again, at home, you can do a hangboard workout, and then maybe a second workout if you had a woody that is, an interval protocol, like a 30-30 interval, like I talked about in the previous question. So I would think, you're a young climber, 4 days a week of training is a good thing, as long as it's not like 4 super high intensity workouts. That would be one too many or two too many. But if you kind of, are able to do the 2 gym sessions and the 2 home sessions, that could be a very effective program for you to, over the coming years, build your physical fitness, your climbing specific fitness. And then when you get to the New River Gorge, be able to climb your very, very best. Okay, and it looks like I have exhausted what questions have been typed in, and I've gone 50 minutes, so that's a pretty good training cafe. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I typically do these on Mondays at noontime, so if you're new to the training cafe, it's not an every Monday thing, but I try to do it once or twice per month. I usually send out a notice around 10 a.m. The morning that I'm going to do these. So be sure to follow me, either Eric_Hörst on Instagram, or training the number 4 climbing on Instagram. And definitely subscribe to the Training for Climbing YouTube channel and ring the bell, because then you'll get that notification an hour or 2 ahead of time that a training cafe is on the way. And this might be a thing that you just kind of tune into and listen to while you're working or working out. Certainly you can listen to it after the fact on the YouTube channel. But if you tune in live, it's more fun. I get to answer your training questions, and we get to sip coffee together. So with that, dear friend, thank you for joining me. I'll hopefully see you again in a couple of weeks when we do this all again. Spread the word about the Training Cafe, tell a friend, and hopefully I'll see both of you next time around. Have a good day.